Thank you so much, Mandy, to having me tonight. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining me to reading, and also Siavash for helping me during this journey and also reading tonight. Thank you everyone for being here tonight with me and یک سلام ویژه هم به وطندارای عزیز دارم کسایی که تشریف آوردن و فارسی گپ میزنن. بسیار زیاد تشکر. خوش آمدین. Sure. قدمتان روی چشم. یک بخش من میخوانم بعد میدم به لیزا استیجه and after that سیاوش. Bread and bullets. Afghanistan is the land of invisible bullets and the land of death foretold, the land of doomed destinies and the land of dejected and disgruntled youths, waiting forever for dreams that will never come true. This is how Mother, my mother, Ansari, and Nana Jan, my grandmother, Firuze, described my homeland to me when I was barely 4 years old. In their eyes, Afghanistan was divided between the Russian occupiers and their communist government allies on the one side and the Mujahideen on the other. But for me, Afghanistan was divided between the street in front of our house where I played during ceasefires and the dangerous world beyond our walls when war returned and kept me stuck inside. I was a bright, playful child, too young and energetic to understand fear, whether of invisible bullets buzzing through the air or of Russian tanks rumbling in the street outside our house. Inside those walls, there was a courtyard filled with apple and mulberry trees and red and green grapes growing on the vine. We were 3 generations living there, Baba Jan and Nana Jan, their 4 daughters, my aunts Kubra, Hajar, Azizan, Zahra, my uncles Nasir and Bashir, Aqa and Mother, plus my baby brother Mushtaq and me. Nana Jan always said a girl should have fear in her eyes. I spent a lot of time in front of the hallway mirror examining my eyes to discover where the fear was hiding. And Zahra told me a girl's fear is right on her eyelids. I would turn my eyes inside out, helping to detect the shape or color of fear. Mother often said, the night this girl was born, we were surrounded by fire. It feels like the city was giving birth. Before Homeira heard her own cries, she heard other people's screams. No wonder she is not afraid from anything. Zahra was 17 when she was struck by one of those invisible bullets while she was trying to pull me out of grapevine and carry me to safety in the basement. My poor aunt fell down on her face. I could hear her gasping for breath. Blood was pouring out of her eyes. I stopped searching for the kittens and tried to find the invisible bullet in her eye, the place where a girl's fear is hidden.
I can't remember a time when my homeland was not at war. My childhood began with jet fighter attacks, bombs falling from the sky, and me trying to count invisible bullets. War and hunger, those are my earliest memories. I remember Modar trying to breastfeed my brother even after he was past the age of 2 because there was no food left to eat. Mushtaq chewed and bit my mother's breast. I heard Modar's quiet whimpering when she knew she had no milk left. During each attack, I watched Nana Jan tie her hijab tighter so that she wouldn't die without her veil and be thrown into hell in the hereafter. Even though she was illiterate, she often pretended to read the Holy Quran as she would run her index finger over the written lines of the scripture. She wanted to die a Muslim, holding the holy book close to her chest. And when I heard Baba Jan reading Surah Yasin, the chapter on God's sovereignty, the day of judgment, and a warning to non-believers, I knew that another bomb attack was coming. My childhood world was within the bounds of a small window, low in the wall of our house, and a mother who was always trying to keep me away from that window. She knew bullets could pierce glass. She tried her best to keep me surrounded by 4 solid cement walls. My mother was like a spider trying to safeguard me within her web. But I was a wild, stubborn baby spider. I kept tearing her web apart to escape. I never tired of the struggle to get outside. I was always looking for a chance to sneak into our walled garden. I wanted to be the first to discover the new bullet holes in the walls. I wanted to be the first one to touch the damaged trees and the burnt timber, to be the first to find the kittens hiding under our grapevine. Finding those invisible bullets was my most secret wish. I asked my mother, "Where do all these invisible bullets come from?" "Homeira," she said, smoothing my hair. "We cannot see where they come from, and we never see where they will go until they strike a tree or a wall or, God forbid, a person." But there were good days too. I remember sneaking out of the house with Aziza on a day when there was no shooting. I remember the bright sunshine and the flow of gentle wind of the season. I sat with my back against the sun-warmed wall of our house, playing in the dust and watching people passing by. I was totally unaware of the Russian tanks approaching on the nearby streets. During ceasefires, I had the habit of going to the smoldering rubble of the bombed houses to see the new ruins and how the garden had been laid to waste. I wanted to see the crumbling walls, the broken windows, the smashed closets, and the shattered china. Once, in one of the houses that had been destroyed 3 or 4 days earlier, I saw a Russian soldier with his pants down. He was pressing his hand on the mouth of a neighbor's daughter. From behind the wall, I laughed at the Russian soldier's bare bottom. He heard my laughter. He quickly got up, put one hand between his legs, and with his other hand, he slapped me on my face until it burned. Then he spat in front of me. The girl used the moment to get up, put on her headscarf, and run away through the ruins. Later, I would laughingly tell everyone the story about how red the Russian soldiers' buttocks were. Upon hearing my account of the event, Uncle Bashir punched the wall with his fists in anger. Baba Jan didn't laugh at the story. He just wiped his tears. In those days, Herat was a very strange mixture of heaven and hell. Sometimes when the city was at peace, you could hear the returning birds chirping in the trees. Sometimes I could hear sweet musical notes as our neighbor's son, Shuaib, sat on the wall playing a reed flute. I would dance to his music on our terrace, but Nana Jan feared that melody, believing that the sound of the flute foretold early death. And soon, indeed, Shuaib died in a fire that consumed his house. Nana Jan once said, "I wish we were all birds so we could fly out of this place." Almost every morning, there was a long row of olive green Russian tanks on the street in front of the hospital near our house, their engines idling under the tall pines that lined the road in the cacophony of noise. They would disappear in the road. They would disappear in the haze of dusk. I asked my grandfather, "Baba Jan, tell me, where do the tanks come from every morning, and where do they go every night?" Baba Jan looked and whispered under his breath, "They come from hell, and they go back to hell." I told Aziza that we should follow the Russian tanks so we could discover the path to hell. "It's too far away, Homeira," she said emphatically. we would get very tired. I told her she was afraid of the Russian tanks. When Nana John no longer had nuts in her pockets, she could no longer bribe Aziza and me to stay in the house. As soon as the city lapsed into silence, we would escape into the street where Modar and Nana John weren't looking. Once, a soldier gave me a tin of canned food. Because we were always hungry, I brought it home. Nana John was horrified, shouting, "Haram! Haram! These cans are filled with frogs," she said. "That's what the red soldiers eat." When Aziza and I heard this, we ran into the backyard and threw up. A few frogs lived in the small stream in our garden, jumping around during the day and croaking their special songs in the evening. On the nights when there was silence, my heart broke for those poor little frogs. I knew the Russians had eaten them. I cried for them under my blanket. During the ceasefires, our entertainment was collecting pine cones or running among the tanks, playing hide and seek with the boys. When the boys hid and I couldn't find them, the Russian soldiers sitting on the tank turrets would point to the boys' hiding spots. I remember that whenever I found a boy, the soldiers would clap and shout, their faces growing red with their laughter. Then I understood why we called the Soviet army the Red Army. One day when it was my turn to hide, one of those red soldiers beckoned me over, a big smile on his round face. He bent down from the top of the tank, reaching his arms toward me. I held my arms up to him. He took my hands and pulled me up into the tank, scraping my shoulder against its hot iron side. My shoulder hurt, but I forgot the pain as soon as I looked around. I stared in amazement at the hundreds of buttons and blinking lights. It was stuffy inside and very hot. Another soldier was sitting on a metal seat. When he caught sight of me, he leaned toward me and said something to the first soldier, who answered quickly. They both started laughing. Then the seated man put his face against a round object. I crawled over and began to touch some buttons beside him. Looking at me over his shoulder, he said, "Niet, na." I pointed at the tube. He leaned back in his seat and motioned for me to stand in front of him. I put my eye against the end of the tube. Inside, I saw a small, round city. When the soldier turned the knob, the city became smaller. He turned the knob more, and the city inside became tiny and far away. I got scared and pulled my eye away. I looked around. We were all still the same size inside the tank. The soldier laughed and turned the knob again. He gestured with his chin, asking me to look into the tube again. The city came closer. The trees got bigger. The size of people standing and crying in front of the hospital grew larger. I saw Aziza, who was still looking for me. Her face was big enough in the tube to see the fear in her eyes. I saw girls in flowery dresses collecting pine cones. The boys had lost the game. They couldn't find me. I was 5 when I saw my city from inside the viewfinder of a Russian tank. My small city, my big city, the city that was very far from me and yet very close to me again. The soldier gave me chocolate. I looked at him and felt ashamed. On one of those days, one of those tanks fired at our neighborhood and left half of our street in ruins. Another hit our grapevine. We then went to the basement and were living there for a while. We covered the floor with 2 large rugs and brought down blankets and slept there at night. I played for hours with a doll that Nana John had made for me. I asked Nana John, "Can you make another dress for my doll so she becomes happy again?" Nana John promised that she would as soon as she found some nice fabric. So I was overjoyed when the tailor shop down the street took a direct hit. As soon as the jets disappeared from the sky, I ran outside and searched the ruins for some beautiful cloth for my doll. Rummaging through the debris, I found a few nice pieces that were only a little dusty. I ran home and showed them to Nana John. I was so excited about getting a new dress made for my doll that I forgot to tell her I saw a hand moving in the rubble. My grandmother looked at the fabric and her eyes widened. "Take it back. This is haram." "These aren't frogs," I said. I never gave them back to the moving hand. I hid them under the grapevine. During the war, there was no flour, so Nana John couldn't bake bread anymore, not even the usual 2 small cakes for Aziza and me. It got even worse later when the roads to Herat were all blocked by the fighting and we didn't even have potatoes to eat. Nana John said that the Mujahideen was starving as well. "They can eat frogs," I said, "or those big Russian chocolates with honey inside." "Homeira," a startled Nana John said, "how do you know what's inside Russian chocolate?" In an attempt to survive the Russian onslaught, people had learned how to pretend to be sympathetic to the Russians by hoisting red banners on their front doors or roofs. Aunt Haja hung a bright red cloth from the clothesline in the yard. So when the Russian jets were spinning above, they would see our household as being sympathetic to them and wouldn't bomb us. My grandmother, who considered my sympathy with communists a sin, cursed her, saying we would all die as kafirs, non-believers, and end up in hell. "We are not communists. Take down that red cloth from the clothesline," she said. Does being a Muslim or a kafir depend on a red cloth? She considers the hoisting of the red cloth an act of blasphemy, and she doesn't understand these murderous Russians. Does she really think God is that unmerciful? Hajar said. "I just don't want to be killed." At night, it was the Mujahideen's turn. They did a house-to-house search for communists and collaborators, climbing walls and jumping into gardens and courtyards. Aunt Hajar hung a green cloth from the clothesline. I teased her, saying, "Should I tell the Mujahideen that you hang a red cloth out in the daytime?" "Homeira, I will tell them you ate Russian chocolates," she said. I became frightened and ran to my grandmother. "Tell Aunt Hajar not to scare me, Nana John." My aunt laughed and stuck out her tongue. Uncle Nasir was a mujahideen, a resistor of the Russian invasion. Mujahideen were labeled rebels by the government, but people liked them and supported them and called them the defenders of the faith. They fought the Russians and suffered a lot, but they were eventually able to expel the invading Soviet forces from Afghanistan. That's when they were also considered the defenders of the homeland. Uncle Nasir came and went like a ghost, jumping into our yard after dark, hiding on the roof with his Kalashnikov. I'd hear his footsteps overhead and then hear him land in the yard. Every night, my grandfather took a mattress, a pillow, and a blanket up to the roof. He always looked worried when my uncle was nearby. "Where did Uncle go, Baba John?" "Hush, child. He's gone to count the stars." "Where does he sleep, Baba John?" "Uncle Nasir's house is on the moon, Homeira." "Can one sleep better on the moon, Baba John?" Baba John sighed. "Yes, Homeira, but you must wake up before the moon sets or it will swallow you." Every night I watched the moon, worried that if Uncle Nasir overslept, the moon would swallow him. That very night, agents of the Khad, the state intelligence agency, stormed into our house looking for Uncle Nasir. Terrified, I pointed to the roof and said, "Stars! Stars!"
Hello, everybody. My dear Siavash, losing you was the most severe pain I have ever suffered, and I know you must be very, very angry. But I felt I had to make a choice. Not just for myself, but also for my country, and ultimately for you. I don't want either of us to belong to a society that degrades women the way the Afghan society does. You, my son, are a new generation, and it is my deepest hope that by the time you grow up, things will have changed, that you will become an instrument of that change. I always have and always will want to be a mother for you. But I also need to remain Homeira for myself. I could not trade my name for a number. I could not sacrifice my freedom or my dignity. I could not become just another humiliated woman, banished to the supposed sanctuary of our home. I cannot die under a blanket as an angry, pitiful, desolate woman. I am trying to save myself, and by doing that, perhaps save other women as well. I ask you now not to only forgive me. I know that you have suffered such pain, and I'm 1,000 times saddened by that. But you, my child, are poised to become a man of your homeland's tomorrows. You don't have to set off on your father's path. It is my fondest wish, my son, that someday, somehow, this story I've told you about my life will help you and your children and your children's children create and nurture new Afghanistan, so that the suffering of my mother's mother, my mother, and me will not have been in vain. With the passage of time, you will grow bigger and straight as I grow smaller and frail. But no matter the condition, I will fight to reach you and save you. Remember, I'm not just fighting for you and me. This land has many tight-lipped, veiled, and silenced women. I will remain your storytelling Shahrazad. I will tell you so many stories that no matter where you and I live, my stories will reach you. In my stories, no angel suddenly appears to save you and me. And there is no magic wand that will bring us together. You and I have to rise against the dark tyranny of these monsters and fight for ourselves. Come now, let me tell you the story I promised you in the beginning. Once upon a time, there was an almighty God and the Buzaki-Kandi, which are 3 baby goats named Angak, Bangak, and Kolalasangak. One day, the Buzaki-Kandi went to feed on fresh grass to sweeten her milk for her kids. But before leaving, she warned her babies not to open the door to any stranger. A vicious wolf that has been eyeing the Buzaki-Kandi and his kid from a distance was waiting for such an opportunity. He came to the Buzaki-Kandi's house and knocked on the door very gently. The kids asked, "Who's there?" The wolf said, "Your mother." The baby goat said, "If you're telling the truth, show us your front hooves." The wolf ran and patted his claws and flour and returned. He slid his powdered cloth under the door. As soon as the kids opened the door, the wolf attacked them and swallowed Angak and Bangak alive. But Kolalasangak hid in the sunken oven and waited for his mother's return. When the Buzaki-Kandi came and heard the story, she was very angry. The Buzaki-Kandi went to the roof and bawled loudly, "Who ate my Angak? Who ate my Bangak?" The wolf responded with a sense of joy and pride, "I ate your Angak. I ate your Bangak." Buzaki-Kandi took a jug of her milk to the blacksmith and asked him to sharpen her horns. She then went to a duel with the wolf. The wolf attacked the goat with his sharp teeth. The goat ripped the wolf's stomach with his sharp horns and rescued her babies, joyous and smiling, from the wolf's stomach. Then, with the help of the baby goats, she put a heavy stone in the wolf's stomach so it could not move no more. My babies, Yavash, I miss you. I've cried for you so many times, but I've never lost hope. I know that one day we will, together, take our stories to the bazaar and free thousands of beautiful babies. I know that you've been told I'm dead, but I'm not dead, my dear Siawash. I'm very much alive. I'm your mother. My name is Homeira, and this is my voice. Thank you. I wanted to thank everybody for coming here and listening to, and thank you for your patience. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much to all for participating in this lovely, valuable, and inspiring program. In this part of our program, we have a discussion about Homeira's novel, Dancing in the Mosque. And now I respectfully invite Dr. Qaderi to join us, and we will discuss about her novel. Thank you so much for participating again.
Could you tell us about the language that you wrote the book in and who translated it, or did you write it straight into English?
I started to write this book at 2016, and at that time, my English is not enough well to speak, and leave alone the writes. But even if I can write in English, I'm not enough brave to write in English, because when we wanted to write, we don't. I can speak for myself. I don't want to face with barriers like a vocabulary, or on other, grammar problems. So I prefer to write in Farsi, Persian, and I had a translator. He is around at that time was 70s. He was very, very patient for translate this book with me, because my English is not well yet, but at that times, I went with him through every sentence, because I could understand that the words or vocab that he chose for my sentence is the vocab that I want or not. So it's taken near to 4 years of me to go through the translator, to go through the process of translations, and also others. So these books take 4 years just because of the language.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to welcome you, Dr. Qaderi, in Pittsburgh. بسیار خوش آمدین. خوشحال هستم شما رو باز هم می‌بینیم. I would like to ask you about how you connect your book with the ongoing gender apartheid in Afghanistan right now.
بسیار خوش آمدین.
ممنون شما.
قدمتان روی چشم. So I always use any stage that I approach to use it for a stage for all of women in Afghanistan. It's just an excuse for me to come and speak about my book, but use it for the situation that women of Afghanistan is going through of it these days. And you know my stories well. And you know that I was in Afghanistan in 1996 to 2001. And I was in I don't know if I can say in my house, because it was most similar to a jail for us. We didn't have any, mobility in Afghanistan. We didn't have permission to go out, even for doctor appointments. No school, no university, no job for my mom at that time. So I know the situation. I know it very well. I know it with every cell of my body and my soul. I don't know what I can do with my book, or my books, but I know that if we don't speak, if we don't write about women in Afghanistan, we will help to the narrative of the word that they say Afghanistan is a forgotten race right now. So I'm trying to speak about it. I'm trying to speak with people who can help us in these situations. At least they can help us with the academic situation for bringing two girls in Afghanistan. I'm an artist. I know I cannot do something very fast. I'm not a political person. But I know if we bring some changing to the art, that change will be stable forever. So I'm using this stage to speak about the women of Afghanistan always.
you. Thank you for coming here today. I just wanted to say that first. And my question for you is, what made you choose the title Dancing in the Mosque, especially dancing?
I remember that in those days when Taliban took the power and seized my city, from the first days, they announced their rules through mosques, and there was no school anymore. So I was 12, around 12, and I was one of those who couldn't go join the school after that, my school. I remember near to 1 year I cried, but honestly, for the first month, I was very happy. I said, oh, we don't have a school and we can join, to visit friends. But when Taliban banned any, mobility of women in the streets without mahram or even sometimes with mahram, I started to get depressed in the home. And for the first year, I cried. And at the second year, my mom told me that, Homeira, if with crying, you could have something, it was me that I could have a big building with crying. So you should do some things. And I started, of course, it was her idea to turn her kitchen to a school. And we, in our city, there was people who came through famine from other states to Herat to find job or food. So they live in front of our home. There was very big empty land. And UNICEF brought them tent, and they started to living there. And when I had my school in the home for the neighborhood's girls and even boys, some of those girls from other state who lived in those tents came to our house and look at those girls who try to learn and read and write. So my father told me, why you don't go and teach for those girls too? So my fathers helped me to speak with their family, and they had a big tent. The name of, they titled that tent Mosque, because they could go there and pray, So it was a tent, actually. It wasn't a mosque. It was a tent. And they give me the time between those time of prayer. And I think it was after the prayer it's between 1 and 3 at that time of the afternoon. And I had a shift for teaching those girls. And one day, I remember that many of my students were absent. And the next day when they came, I asked, why you didn't join the class yesterday? And one of those naughty boys in the class told me that, teacher, they went for a, what we say to arusi, for wedding. And that naughty boy told me even that these girls dance very well. And I told you I was a teenager, and I asked them how you dance, because they came from another state, and our dances, were different shape. And so those girls didn't want to dance in the tent because they scared that boys go and gossiping in the family that girls dancing in tents. And the boys promised me to never say in the families. And so those girls started to dancing. And very close to our school or our tent, there was a checkpoint. So because we clapping and we laughing and we dancing at that time, we were dancing, Taliban heard that. And they came, but they asked me what you did with this, because their dance was circling around. And I told to that Talib that they didn't learn Quran Sharif very well, so I punished them to running around the tent. And he believed me, but he told me that even this circling and running is haram. So it was dancing in a tent, but that tent's named Mosque. And so and because it was one of my best memories of those days that Taliban took the power, I like that chapter a lot. So I used that name of that chapter for the whole book.
I don't know how to ask my question because I think there are a lot of nuances behind it. But so I have read the book when I was in Afghanistan. I was born and grew up in Herat. So the book has a lot of details. And my question is there a point in the book that you think that you are distancing too much from the reality in favor of keeping the narrative as you want? Because you are a great writer, and the book is an excellent book. It touches you, it impacts you. Although I am a man in Afghanistan, was born in Afghanistan, I may not connect with many details and many situations that you're describing perfectly. But my question is there in the book that you feel that you are distancing from the realities too much in order to keep the narrative flowing, if that makes sense?
You know, I'm not, this book is not my only book. So I have 7 books in Farsi. So I'm a writer. I'm not a person who writes a memoir and done. So I'm working on 2 other books. One of them will become, I hope, will come in next year in exhibition of Tehran, book exhibition in Tehran. And the second is Tell Me Everything. So I'm a writer. My job is to write. So when I wrote this book, I used that expertise to write my memoir too. So it's not just a memoir, it's a literature memoir. So, but for make a memoir very fluently in the narrative way, you should give to writer all those details. It's make your book very rich. When we speak about some, for example, details about the scene, since, for example, about the building, maybe it doesn't came to you very, it doesn't show itself very distance of reality. But when it came about the Taliban and their rules, maybe it's a little bit. At that time in Afghanistan, it's take a distance. I don't know your age. A lot of people, even people from my city told me, no, Taliban were not like that, not very brutal like that. But I have a lot of message after 2020 and said, we are very sorry. Because I don't know why people forgot about those rules, about those details, about those restrictions that Taliban brought to our in 1990. I don't know about your age, but I remember them very well. I lose a lot of friends at that time, so how I can forget? Even I can, after 24 years, I cannot forget the smile of my friend Lida. She was a poet in Herat. I cannot forget about Shakiba. She was not a poet, she was not a writer, but she was my friend. And we had very good time. I can describe this moment that I was with Shakiba or Lida very well, like a day, like a light day, even now. So when we say far from reality, we should exactly say which part. Our buildings not very different from last 20 years, but when we speak about political problem, most of these books speak about the Russian times, about the civil war, and about the Taliban times in Afghanistan. And because I experienced all these times, I think with the bring details in this book, I try to make it more clear for you.
Hello. Your writing is absolutely beautiful. I really enjoyed all of the excerpts from it. It was amazing. And I was kind of interested in there were like 2 different kind of things that I picked up on when you're portraying the Russians. There's one that's very dehumanizing and monstrous. And then there's the other one where you see them in the tank with you as a child, and they're just like kind of having fun and enjoying the company of a little girl, and it's kind of endearing. And so I wondered how you kind of grappled with the reality of what they're doing politically, which is so truly terrible, and then what you might have experienced personally as a little girl going into this and like maybe befriending one or two soldiers.
As a writer, I wanted to have the commitment to the reality. And it was the same. One days they were our enemy, and the other days, somehow, sometimes they were friends. And I couldn't to ignore one side because of another. I remember their face. I cannot say about their age, but they were really young. Based on my knowledge now, I don't think they were more than 23, 24, 22. They were all young soldiers from Russians. And at the end of the day, they really liked to play. They were human beings, And I saw very brutal things when they did to us. I cannot forget it. I cannot forgive it. But at the same time, I said good days with them. How I could forget it. I didn't want to see things white or black. I wanted to go gray between those days and be commitment to the reality. But they happened, and I wrote them. I didn't want to, because of my ideology, because I didn't like them, to ignore those days.
Beside this interesting, like the title of the book, and also beside the details, and I grew up in Herat too. I want to know that what was your biggest inspiration for just writing this book? Because I know even during the government, there was so many restrictions for women and girls in Herat. So what was your biggest inspiration, and who just inspired you to write this book? Thank you.
بسیار خوش آمدین. قربانتان. میتونین که جمله آخرتان رو تکرار کنین وقتی میگین based on government use میکنین با کدام کیر میگین government?
Like
which years?
Which years?
Yeah.
Because when I just, as a girl, I don't feel like too much like free in growing up in Herat.
Okay.
Yeah.
During the public Republic period, you want to say?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to say yes. We were not. Our situation were not perfect at Republic times, but there was not gender apartheid. We allowed to go to schools. We allowed to go to university. We had our jobs. We could visit each other. We didn't need to mahram. So the situation were not perfect, but we worked for it all together, even in a very teeny village in Afghanistan, because I remember in 2009, some village around my city, they didn't have schoolgirls, but in 2020, when I was senior advisor for education ministers, there were a lot of schools, more than enough for some of the village, so. But now, the situation is totally different. We cannot compare them together.
Yeah, because they are different even right now and before. But beside that, my question just was this, that what was your inspiration to just write this book?
Yes. For me, reading started when I was very young. My father, I remember he fought with Russian, but at the same time, he really liked to read the literature. We had shelves and shelves of Russian literature, so I started to read at that time that we were, stuck in basements. But when Taliban seized the power, I thought reading is not enough for me. I felt more suffocated than, every time. So I started to writing. So I don't know that I am using this sentence is okay or not, but I owe to Taliban because they opened through the restriction, this window to the new world for me. And also I remember my father told me that through writing you can make your word. And it was a good, inspiration for me. I started to writing at that time, and it worked for me like a healing. And many years later, in 2016, when I didn't have Siawash, between 2001 till 2016, again, writing was a process of a writer for me. But in 2016, when I didn't have him, my son, again, I look at writing as a process of healing. So the inspiration sometimes was my sorrow. But at the general, it was my dream to be a writer, and I went for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit of the story of you and your son coming back together again?
As our friend mentioned before, even in period of republic, our situation were not perfect. There was some rights for us, but it's still basic rights. And we don't have any rights right now. So based on Sharia law, after divorce, everything belonged to men. And so I didn't have my son because of Sharia law. And when I came here and I decided to stay because I lose everything in my life, my house, my son, my husband, my career, I wasn't enough strong to go back and fight for having all of these things again. So in 2019, late of 2019, I returned to Kabul with this decision that I will take him and I will fight with Sharia law. I will fight for, I don't know, with the traditions rule in Afghanistan. And it took me near to 2 years being in court, day by day. And I stay in those hallways, long hallways, to see judge and speak to them and say, believe me, I am a good woman. Can you please leave me to live with my son? And it was such an irony because in Afghanistan, when a woman in hallways of courts, it means you are not already a good woman. It took 2 years to show them that I am a good woman. And I remember that one of those judges told me that you're still young. Why you don't marry to have your son? And I told him that it's the same circle. If he is not my son right now, how you can guarantee that the others will be mine? It wasn't easy. I remember that I wear long dress, black long dress, because even I scared to wear a colorful dress because I wanted to be a very good woman. And one of those days, I went to one of those office of judge, and I see this book on her table. Believe me, it was like taking a heart attack. Because when we say judge something from the cover, it was exactly that. This name doesn't need to go through the box. This name was enough for a court based on Sharia law. Really, he told me, you dancing in the mosque. I was speechless. I scared. Not scared to give my answer, scared to lose my son again. I wanted to be a good woman, silent woman. It took 2 years. I was very brave during days, but like a chicken during nights. And finally, I have him till 9 when he get to he's 9. And when Taliban attacked Afghanistan, he was around 8. And I used that opportunity and escaped to United States just because of to being his mother, to keep my motherhood. And I'm sure if I was still in Afghanistan, I didn't have that mercy to have him as my son or be a mother for him.
We have time for about 2 more questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. It takes a lot of courage to do that, and you wrote 7 books, so that's amazing about it. I remember as a teenager growing up in New Delhi, not a teenager, sorry, I would say early 20s, and there was an Afghan girl who had just moved from Kabul. She was terrified to just come outside to play badminton with anybody else. Maybe that was the thing. We don't know much about it. I wouldn't know much about it. But skipping to future, how do you see the future? Would you like to go back to Herat? And if you want to go back, how do you want to see it?
When Taliban left Afghanistan is not a correct word. When Taliban escaping to mountain to rebuild their groups again in 2001, or found the support of other countries who always bring proxy war in Afghanistan, I went to Iran to studies after 5 years. Returning back to Herat in 2009, of course I went and back for visit the family, but returning to Kabul or Herat to live in that city was a nightmare for me, because when I left Afghanistan, still there was Taliban, and still, the idea of Taliban, and people were also Talib at that time. It was a nightmare, but the time was changed. People was changed after 10 years, and especially in Kabul. And I had that opportunity to go to have a job or, be an activist for women's rights, or at least for my rights, not women's rights. And now, for me, actually, I see the reputation of history in Afghanistan. It means, again, 1996, and I'm going through all of this pain. And because I feel guilty, because I'm not with those girls, I started to teach them and rebound myself with the girls of Afghanistan. Through their eyes, I know that they cannot see a future because they are in dark times and they cannot see a future or light for Afghanistan. But because I lived those days, those years, 5 years, and finally I saw the light in the end of the dark tunnels, I know there will be some sun shining. One day, I know not very soon. I know many things get lost for a little bit more till words understand. It's a big shame for us our girls cannot go to school, not for Taliban, because they define their identity, and we don't have any problem that with Taliban because we know the rules from 1996. But it's a big shame for us till we could recognize that shame and recognize gender apartheid, and we take some practical steps. It takes time. And I know the future will change. I do sure that one day I will go to Herat again, but I know that I never ever will have the same Herat that I left, because many of my friends in Kabul and Herat, they left Afghanistan. I cannot have, we will show our house, our buildings, but not our space that we lived in that. Sometimes, believe me, the only things that keep me here is my son. I cannot leave him here, and I cannot take him with me to put him in dangerous situations. Sometimes I say, I can go to Iran, and I can go through the border to Afghanistan in Herat, and I will continue to teaching creative writing to girls through the Google meetings, virtual. And I think maybe Taliban don't come for me. It's all like, it's all, every night I go all this way. I go from United States to Iran and through borders, Iran borders, go to Afghanistan, to my city, and I go to my alley. And at the end of the morning, at the end of the night, I wake up in my home in New Haven. So it's a every night journey for me, but I know one day I will go. In reality, I know.
Hi. I grew up in Kabul, and I saw you at Television Tolo one time. So I know like you have a lot of a big platform, and you're famous in Afghanistan. And with that, I wonder, like you said, Afghanistan is like going through a dark time, especially Afghan girls right now. How do you think, other than like personally mentoring girls in Afghanistan, how do you think you bring brightness into their life through your platform and fame? And sort of like the role model you are for them.
In 1997, we had a class under the name of the Swing Golden Needle in Herat, and we were 4 girls of Herat. We're supposed to do needlework, but instead of that, we write and read a story there. And it was the only reason that I could survive. It's helped me a lot. And when Taliban conquered Herat again, I knew that all of the restrictions will return back to women of Afghanistan. So I thought what we can do beside of the writing. Writing is a long process. You cannot, waiting for a big change with writing. Many writers write a lot of books against war. They are anti-war writers. But have you even heard that this war stopped just because of those books? Never, ever. Always, voice of the gun is dominate the voice of the pens. So I don't come with a lot of, dreams. I have a lot of wishes to kind of stop war, but I'm a person with reality, I know I cannot do it. But I asked myself what can help practical to those girls who is going through all those bad times in this dark time. And I used the same path that I went with my other 3 friends. I am teaching them creative writing, and again is an excuse. In every classes, we have 70 to 100 students. It not means that every time I'm giving to the society 100 writer. No, it's impossible. Even if in 5 years I can have a good writer, one writer, I think I did my job. But is an excuse. Teaching them is an excuse to be together, to survive daily, to keep them busy from one Monday to another Monday. The things that happened for me, it was the same. I gave them some PDF and asked them you should read it. And the next session, I asked them, you really read that book? I asked about the character of the books. And we found the way to survive. In the practical step, I do this. But how I can use the platform that I have? My platform is not a political platform. It's a cultural and artist platform, And it's like this. We came here and we speak about women in Afghanistan. We don't allow the word forgot us, and we try to speak about them. I don't know the result, but if tonight one of you want to join me or join other group to help Afghanistan and help to women in Afghanistan, it means, again, I did my job.
Thank you, everybody. Wendy, would you like to close out with a few words from Cass?
Thank you. I'm going to come up here. So first of all, I want to thank you all for coming and for your wonderful questions and for the honor that you've given us all for sharing this with us. Please join me in a round of applause for Homeira for having shared her beautiful work with us. And the amazing Siavash.
I always say Afghanistan needs some more supportive men. So I'm trying my best to involve him in my journey for advocate women, not only in Afghanistan, in everywhere.
And everywhere, yeah.
Everywhere. So he is one of those who will join me in every journey, and I think you believe. You believe?
Yeah, I believe.